Hello everyone, and or hopefully I should say Gia, which my Irish pronunciation is nowhere near accurate. I do apologise for that. But yeah, good afternoon, or even P'nawn to our Welsh attendees, if anyone's here from Wales. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sophie Crouch, and I'm a project coordinator at Mentor Mon, working as part of the Selkie Project, and I'll be chairing today's session. I do recognise a few names joining us today, so I won't give the full-blown presentation on the Selkie Project, as I'm sure you've heard it a few times now. But as a brief background for anyone who doesn't know much about us or what we do, we are a cross-border collaboration project between Wales and Ireland, funded through the European Regional Development Fund and Interreg. We have lots going on in the project, including research and development for the wave and tidal sector, as well as knowledge transfer to the industry through events such as this one today. And we do also offer a range of business support options, which is all free to businesses that are part of the Selkie network. So if you would like to know more, please do visit our website, which is selkie-project.eu. Or if you'd like to find out more about how the project may be able to support your business in the industry, you can also get in touch with myself directly through sophie@mentormon.com. As I'm sure many of you probably heard, having registered for this session, this is a series of events organised by ourselves, the Selkie Project, and it's focused on providing business support for companies in the marine energy industry or those looking to diversify into the marine energy sector. So hopefully they'll give your company the opportunity to learn more about key themes from experts, and they'll also give you a chance to network and meet with other companies, hopefully hear about the various projects and developments going on. So today we have a key topic in the series, which will be focused on health and safety considerations for offshore marine projects. And we're delighted to be joined by our expert, Declan Dixon of Irish Marine Safety. We had a fantastic session this morning, actually. A few of you might have joined us with Watson Ord Renewables. So we're very much looking forward to hearing perspectives from across the Irish Sea this afternoon. Just before we do get started, I'll just run through a few housekeeping guidelines, although I'm sure everyone is well versed in these online formats. But just remind everyone to just keep yourselves on mute unless otherwise indicated, just to prevent feedback so we can hear our speaker clearly. And do please feel free to add the name of your company in your name tag on screen. You can edit it just by using the 3 dots in the top right hand corner of your picture. It'd be great to see where everyone's joining from. After hearing from Declan, we'll be holding a Q&A session. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I think Declan's very keen to hear if anyone has any thoughts or questions on the presentation. So do put those in the chat. And if you need any assistance as well, just send a message in the chat as well. We've got my colleague Jay on hand to help with any technical difficulties. And then sort of finally, if you're on social media, please do follow us. You can find us at Selkie Project on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I will just say that this session will be recorded and shared on our website in the coming days. So you'll be able to go back and use it as a resource or share with your colleagues if they may find it useful and weren't able to attend. So I think that's probably enough from me, giving you lots of information. So I'd now like to introduce today's speaker, Declan Dixon from Irish Marine Safety. I'm sure we'll hear all about it, but Irish Marine Safety have a fantastic depth of experience providing a range of marine-based safety services for marine operations across a number of offshore sectors. We're delighted to hear from Declan this afternoon. So thank you, Declan. I will hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's presentation. It's just going to be a general sort of dip into health and safety in the marine environment, which, as you may be aware, is a slightly different and slightly different to other industries where you've got sort of legislation that's sort of more sort of national and international based. So what we'll just do is we'll just go through that very sort of broad brush strokes at the moment. and I'm happy to take questions during it. If there's anything you want clarification for, just say send a message on, or just come in yourself and just ask. It's just going to share screen now. Hopefully everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay, so just a wee bit on the background. My name's Declan Dixon. I started the company Irish Marine Safety back in 2018. I have extensive marine background. I worked for the RNLI for over 23 years actually, and of those, the last 10 were sort of basically dealing in health and safety of the operations of lifeboats and the crews. So a lot of this information is based on best practice then, and measures we implemented and controls that were put in by the RNLI. So from that, I've taken it out and I've gone out in 2018. I sort of went out on my own, and I've been involved in many different sectors within the marine, fishing, commercial, wind energy, and as you know, on the East Coast here, it's an opportunity, and there's possibilities there of expanding this industry, and the opportunities there need to be taken. But again, safety then comes into that, and sort of keeping the individual and the company safe and making the right choices. So the reasons, right, so why? So there's there's always a moral reason. Reduce incidents and ill health rates. If you're a company or you're an operator within the marine energy field, what you don't want to be doing, you don't want to be having individuals being injured or basically injured or affected by the work you carry out. So you do that, but there's a moral obligation on you then to put in place the required measures and controls. Social, protect people and the environment. That where it comes to, especially where it comes to with the way we communicate now, any sort of issues or problems or challenges can be sort of sent out within seconds. So what we have to do is we have to protect our people, protect the environment, and we want to avoid negative media reports. You want to avoid that sort of that your company being seen in a negative way because of your poor standards within health and safety. Then the final one will be the financial. These costs can be direct or indirect, insured and uninsured, loss of income. But as anyone said, it's an iceberg. What you see on top is your small fraction of that figure that an accident or an incident may cost. Where it comes to say an incident, first thing you have to do, you have to redirect resources to investigate it. So you've got that. So that's the resources being lost from somewhere else to go, and you might have to shut down. You might have to close off. You might have to make put emergency controls in place to restrict the further actions or circumstances that will elaborate or exaggerate what's already after happened. So that there is a financial cost involved in that as well. Main safety legislation in Ireland, the main is the Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act 2000. This sets out the main provision of securing and improving health and safety in work. Because as you saw there, where you've got your onshore, your onshore tasks, you've got your marine-based tasks, and then what you have that sort of, which is areas a lot of people, and from prior experience, I see an awful lot of people sort of don't pay enough attention to that sort of intermediate task between sort of boarding a boat, putting people aboard, putting equipment aboard, that transition from a fixed to a floating resource. So what we just sort of say is, when you start looking at your whole sort of system, what you have to do is you have to look at how this will affect from start to finish. So that would be from your equipment arriving on a dock, say, to being placed on board a vessel, to be taken out to sea, to being placed in the water, to be whatever sort of requirements are needed. It's important as well that it's the whole process, not just the single process that you say, oh, we're going to A, B, and C, we're going to put the equipment on board. Yeah, but to put the equipment on board, you need lifting equipment. You need, so all of these different aspects then have to be taken into account then to get that sort of broader cover and broader view of the task, identifying the risks and the hazards involved with that as well. So just a few examples there of sort of man overboards, recoveries. So where the recovery is from affects how your process is put into place and the measures within that. Safety policy, yeah, this is where we start, where we get into the HSA and the requirement within Ireland. A health and safety policy is a written document which recognises safety integral part. This is your top end document. This just sets out how we're going to, how as an organisation, and an organisation can be even an individual. According to HSA, any individual working for themselves should have a safety policy, a safety statement. This doesn't have, this is usually a 1 or 2 page document, but it does just set out that sort of, that big picture sort of approach to it. So we are going to make sure we don't injure any of our employees. We are going to make sure that we our actions do not create any environmental issues or other issues that could be seen as dangerous to others or the wider environment. We provide a framework of actions. So what you do is you sort of set out then how this policy is going to be implemented, and from that you start dropping, you hang all those different aspects onto that. These are all sort of, this is sort of your big picture. This is your starting point, and everything falls from this. A safety statement is a written document which specifies. There's so many different variations on a safety statement. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's what you have to do is what suits your company by size, by risk, by so many of other different factors. You can see people coming out with safety statements that are a couple of pages, and then other companies that are sort of larger will come out with volumes of folders of safety documentation that falls under their safety statement. But again, it's mainly a widening or expanding of the policy, and then again how you're going to implement it. You're going to put these procedures in place. So you're getting more into the process now of how you're going to implement your health and safety within your company or as an individual, how you're going to do it. It's all sort of it's the simple. It's to create a reference then going forward. What are hazards? Sometimes I didn't know where to pitch this, so what I just did is I said I'll just go in and just sort of we'll start at the basics. So the first thing is hazard is the potential to cause harm. Hazard and risk sometimes get mixed up. So for the example I've used here is a set of pyros, parachute flares. So they are a hazardous piece of equipment, but the risk then, it comes from how we actually use them, we store them, we maintain them, we look after them. So risk is the likelihood of potential severity of consequences. So basically where it comes to, and I use the flares and the sort of pyrotechnics as a good example of this. This is a rocket line. The photograph there is of a rocket line. Where it comes to, they've all got these little instructions on the side of them, and everyone goes, yeah, this is how we, and they'll watch a video, and this is how we use a piece of equipment, the pyro, whatever. But there is another aspect, a failure. What happens if there's a failure of a piece of equipment? What do we do? What's the safe procedures? How do we then reduce a risk? So like where it comes to any pyros, the first thing you say is you store them in a suitable container that's waterproof, that's away from, you don't basically leave them lying around sort of where they can get wet, they can get they can be affected by the elements. What you do is you put them in a watertight container, you keep them safe, you mark up your date, you record your dates, you monitor them, you control the inspection process of them, and as you go forward, then you implement controls that can update and change out, say for the example, expiry dates, damaged or defective equipment should be taken off service or out of use. And this is what you do. You make that call on the risks that you see that is basically the likelihood of potential of severity of cause hazard. So if you have a pyrotechnic sitting on an open surface, rolling around, getting wet, then again the risk involved in that is higher than if you've got it suitably contained in a safe locker, marked up, correct reference documents in with it, even small how-to sheets, something like that. What you do is you make the likelihood, you reduce the likelihood, the potential, the risk itself is what you're trying to reduce. The hazard is basically a hazard. It's a pyrotechnic. What you're trying to do, you cannot change the hazard itself. What you're trying to do is reduce the risk of something unbeknownst or unplanned happening to that item or piece of equipment. Risk assessment, yeah, I'll just go quickly through a risk assessment. Basically, you look for the hazards. Again, as I said at the start off, it's from the start to the finish. It's not sort of like go at what you believe is the most hazardous aspect of a task. It's the full task from start to finish. How you're going to get the piece of equipment on board, how you're going to lift it, how you're going to check people are able to lift it, how you're going to make sure they have the right training records. It's the full broad spectrum rather than decide who and who might be harmed and how. So your piece of equipment coming on board, what could fail, what could possibly go wrong, who have you got involved, how could they be harmed or be injured, and then what you do is try to mitigate it against that by putting in again the controls to reduce the risk. Step 3, evaluate this, decide whether existing precautions are adequate and should or more should be done. Again, what you're going to do is you're sort of saying, yeah, we've lifted something similar for the last 20 years and we've always done this. That's not a reason for doing it the same way. But what it is you can evaluate it then. You can maybe yeah, we've been doing it for 20 years, but maybe there's a safer way. There's new equipment, there's new plant, there's new ways of working. It's simple stuff. What you do every time, you're just trying to reduce that risk to a lower level. We record significant findings. That's so important where it comes to health and safety, is recording. If you find, as I say, you get your hazard, you then list off your risks. You look for the hazard. You identify your risks. Now what you have to do is record that. There's your risks. How are you going to deal with each one of these risks to reduce, then implement control measures and reduce the likelihood of it causing harms. Review on the assessment and revise as necessary. Once you have done a risk assessment, that's not it. It's not a one-off piece of work. It's something that's continually evolving and changing throughout the lifespan of the task or of the piece of equipment. So what you're doing is your risk assessment may change, and that might be affected by internal, external aspects. So if legislation changes, big thing is code of practices. So if there's new code of practices, there's new legislation that affects your work. Find out what it is, and then how it reflects on what you have in place. If you've got something in place that, as I say, you've been working off for the last 10, 15 years and it's been perfect, but now it contradicts a new piece of legislation or code of practice, what you have to do then is sort of put in place those controls then to take that into, take the new measures in place, and then again reduce the risk. As say, you don't want to put something in place and then find out that you've created additional risks that weren't foreseen before. So as you reduce one risk, you may create another. So what you have to do is find your balance, and as I say, put the controls in place and reduce the risk all the time. Hierarchy of control. Yeah, again, I've just been going on about this. Eliminate the hazard. Is there something that can totally eliminate a hazard? So an example would be so depth of in working within an area. If you eliminate the hazard, you go and you maybe put a good sounder in instead of working sort of on charts maybe that are all out of date and maybe not as reliable as they used to be. Substitute with less hazardous materials. That's again, That's again, it's about the process that so what you can do is there some way you can do a task to take out the hazardous aspects? Can you implement the required controls to take maybe the higher risk aspects and reduce them? Use engineering controls. Again, that's the sort of the safety locks, the control, the actual physical controls. Maybe, as you say, lifting equipment. Keep on going back to lifting equipment. So lifting equipment, is there sort of different sort of shackles? Is there different sort of lifting mechanisms that you can use to lift and release? Maybe that don't need someone standing underneath a piece of equipment, that closer piece of equipment when it's being lifted. Can we change an aspect of it to reduce that as well? So you actually physical control. Using safety signage, markings and warnings. Again, if this is sort of, as I say, this comes from you're dropping down the list. Ideally, you want to start at the top and eliminate, but at some stage you're going to say, right, we've looked at all the controls we have. We've still got a risk there. So what we'll do is we'll make sure people are aware of what the risks are. We'll make them make sure they're aware of where they should stand, even on a deck when you're working. Safe areas, even create safe areas. Something as simple as that you stand in this area. If there's an individual that maybe not as experienced as others that he's working with, have a safe area. This is where you stand. So it's so sort of administrative controls, just that sort of simple little way of informing people of the requirements and the necessary actions then that they need to take. Use of PPE. Actually, that's the lowest. If you only resort to PPE when no other option is available, and that is again where you're working with maybe hazardous substances, maybe working with say sharp edges, whatever it might be. So gloves, glasses, hard hats. For anyone going to sea, it will always be a PDF, personal falsification device. There's no piece of equipment that matches that where it comes to survivability. When someone goes into the water, you can talk all day, and it's one. And you look around the world, and the stats are unbelievable where it comes to PFDs, personal flotation devices, or life jackets. They just save. So that's one piece of personal protective equipment that should be standard on anyone going anywhere near the water at all. In Ireland here, for fishing, it's a legal requirement, and a lot of independent operators will make it mandatory as well that you have to have a life jacket once out on deck. But there again, if you are going to sort of say it's on deck, or make sure it's clearly notified to everyone that it is on deck. It is at certain times. If you're an operator of a vessel, maybe the thing to do is make some areas of the vessel offline. You don't want off limits. So if you've got someone on board, you do not want them going to this area because it's high risk. But clearly indicate that you don't get people sort of that are there to do a task sort of wandering around maybe somewhere that is a place they shouldn't be, but if they're not instructed that way. So it all sort of falls in together. As I say, you start on the top, and the last possible outcome then is your PPE. SOPs and EOPs. Something that, as I say, in previous career at the RNLI, these were things that were rolled out regularly. These are so important. What they do, they agree a certain standard, and that's agreed by everyone. So this shouldn't be the likes of myself or a health and safety individual going, this is the way it's going to be, righto, that's it, follow this. This is a joint task. So this is sitting down with the people undertaking the job, the task, whatever the role is, and saying, what are the things we have to take into account here? What are the aspects of your task that you think are dangerous? And then what you do then is you work your way through that. What you do is you get an agreement. So it's not Declan's SOP, it's not Bob's SOP, it's not John's SOP, it's the SOP. It's the task SOP, the vessel SOP. This one's for a man overboard for a small vessel that I did there. No, and but it should be bespoke. Where a lot of people get caught out, they see something like this and go, great, I see Bob has one of them, I'm going to take it. That sometimes can catch people out, because what you have to do is you have to make it relevant to you, not to so taking it from another vessel or from another task sometimes can leave you open. So an example would be some wheelhouses have other structures, maybe on the left hand side, port side, which is left hand side, I can't believe it's that, the port side. So if a man in a man overboard situation, what you'd always ideally what you'd say, well, go to starboard, because you don't lose vision. Where if you've got a structure on the port side, you will lose vision for that period of time when you come around. Something as simple as that, but you discuss it with the individuals, and you agree what's the best process. You don't sort of state this as being the definitive. This is a guide. This is what, if for whatever reason you can't go to starboard, you have to go to port for many different reasons. Yes, that's what you do. But ideally you'd want to go to starboard. So it's a process that ideally you want to follow. But what you do is you lay down those sort of general sort of guides, agree your roles, your positions, your tasks prior to it, so everyone knows that in an emergency, that they know what to do, where to go, what to pick up. The other thing, from personal and experience, what I avoid doing as well is putting down names. I usually put down roles, because if an individual changes or starts doing a different task, then all of a sudden it gives confusion. So whoever does a task does a certain whoever's doing a task has a certain basically position or control to put in place. So that's another thing that needs to be done. And the other thing is, everyone sort of says, oh well, we've got 4 people on board. Which of those 4 go over the side makes a big difference to the process and the assigning of tasks then as well. So there is that ability then to change and alter to make sure then that the process is followed then. Induction and training. This is so important. Once anyone comes aboard a boat, they should be aware of where all the safety equipment is, where your PDFs are, where your soulless life jackets are, where your firefighting equipment is, what to do in the event of a fire. There is that sort of simple thing of, if you've got a life raft on a wheelhouse and you've got a wheelhouse fire, even though it may be minor, maybe the first things you want to look at is getting the life raft deployed. It's not because you need it, it's because you don't want it on the top of the wheelhouse if the wheelhouse is on fire. So it's that sort of things. What you do is you get everyone to sign on the induction sheet. There's the responsibilities. It sets out your responsibilities to them and their responsibilities to you. So if they're coming on board a vessel, or this is across so many industries that it's just the norm now, is that induction sheets are signed. So you can have an induction via there's many different versions. I know a lot have gone over to IT based ones, Moodle and whatever like that. Maybe few short videos. So you watch the few short videos, refreshers. Working with a company there at the moment where we're actually running out sort of refresher videos, and basically an annual refresher of the induction. So instead of having to sit down and sort of spend the time going through something, what we'll do is we'll assign them a Moodle training platform. We'll assign them a task or a situation that will be backed up by a small video, few questions. Right, guys, just do this once a year, and then what we'll do is it automatically generates a certificate confirming it was being carried out. So it is that as well, sort of that ongoing. The induction is a one-off thing, but the training then must be maintained and kept going. High risk areas, access for most marine bases, access and egress. From, as I said to you before, from a life at the RNLI, the big concern was always that sort of launch and recovery phase. When everyone's sure, it's that sort of transition. Exactly, even where it comes to command and leadership, who is in control of the situation when it's in that sort of space in between two. So you're not ashore, but you're not afloat. And this was specifically where we had a tractor launch equipment. There's like especially larger vessels, you had that sort of gray area, and it's sort of just making sure that there is some sort of definition as much as you can, put a clean line there rather than have that sort of ambiguity maybe, and people wondering exactly who's responsible. No, so that's again where all this documentation, all this planning comes into being. Lifting, again, I keep on going back to lifting associated equipment ashore and important afloat, while afloat. Equipment on a vessel depends on so many different factors, like the vessel itself, the equipment, what type of equipment, like you get that free water effect, you get so many different possibilities and variations that it's impossible. But what you have to do is you have to put in place your own monitoring system, and then sort of on that sort of have a risk-based system that you can sort of say, yeah, go ahead, or maybe no, hold off. We'll have to review this and put additional controls in place. Operational moving platform on deck. It's such a simple one. Everyone thinks everyone that steps aboard a boat is competent on board a boat. Not always. It's not always the case. So it is that sort of checking, double checking, before someone gets on board. Are they aware? Have they worn a PDF before? Are they aware? Are they aware how it operates, the manual inflation? All this sort of aspects go into this. So it's as I say, don't take for granted that people have experience of working in a marine environment, basically where you've got an unstable platform, undulating deck. It's just sort of it's not always the case. Young and less experienced employees, that's an area there. Anyone. I know it's in the same in the UK as well. Anyone under 18 basically is seen as a child. So when it comes to risk assessments, they actually have to be individual risk assessments for each task for that individual. So if you've got a risk assessment for pyrotechnics, if you've got someone below 18 years old on board, what you have to do is you have to make sure that they've been risk assessed to do that task, whatever it may be. Entering the water and drowning. Going on about that again, it is so important. Again, the PPE, the PFDs, perfect flotation devices. I'd say where it comes to SOPs and EOPs, practice and have that awareness. Emergency preparedness. Yeah, there again, these are actually a crew of a fishing vessel I do a bit of work with. So you can see there, we just decided to get them all into survival suits. It's not about getting them into it's about getting the survival suits out, checking them, make sure that they're maintained, having a look, know that any damage, get the guys aware of where it's stored, how it works, how to correctly fit it. Again, maybe the simple stuff is what maybe I usually say here is, lads, if you've got any watches on or any sharp, it's the simple stuff. It's just sort of that, it's awareness. So it's equipment checks, it's drill practice, and then what you do is you review your relevant EOP. So as part of this, what we'll do is we'll take out the EOP and say, right, lads, we're abandoning the vessel. What do we need to do? What we'll do is we go through all the points until we get to the position where they're donning their survival suits. But has anything changed? Do we need to amend it in any way at all, or is this still valid and in date? So what we use that then as well as a way of confirming that the actual procedures in place, the written procedures in place, actually match what would happen in case of emergency. It's so much easier to do it when it's nice and you've got your time. You can take everything out. You can discuss the procedure. You can any gaps you can close or follow on. But always so important, emergency preparedness and preparation. Sorry, just it starts to freezing on me. Accident is none. This just actually watch my time here. Accident, any unplanned event that results in injury, illness of people, or damage and loss of property. So this is basically what an accident is. We want to avoid, as much as possible, avoid an accident. But I haven't put on this is actually incidents and near misses. Where they feed in is basically an incident or a near miss is an accident that has been avoided. So what you want to do is if you have an incident, a near miss or a good catch, there's so many different variations on the name of it. But what you want to do is you look at that. Then you go through your documentation. Does your SOPs, EOPs, and your other control measures actually cover this this aspect, or has it something that's been missed? But you look at it as an opportunity to review the processes and documentation already in place, and if any amendments are required, you can make them. So if everyone has this thing of accidents, oh yeah, wait till the accident happens, and then a near miss or an observation or a good catch is so not beneficial. I don't want to say beneficial, but can contribute so much to your safety, your safety your safety system, that it shouldn't be ignored. You should take anything that comes, anything that you're made aware of, work with it, find out exactly your root cause, and then again, if there's any changes or changes or documents that need to be reviewed, put it in place, make those amendments as required. Accidents, incidents. This is for Ireland. In the UK, it's radar. So report of incidents, dangerous occurrence regulations 2016. In the UK, there's a difference. You have to report additional information, but here it's only incidents and dangerous occurrences. Sorry, in the UK it's illness as well. You don't have to, here in the Ireland, you don't have to do illness. Only fatal and non-fatal injuries are reportable. Diseases, occupational illnesses are impairments or mental conditions are not reportable. So basically it's actual injuries. If someone has an illness due to long-term effects of maybe something that doesn't come in, it's only sort of injuries that are sustained. Fatal injuries must be reported immediately to the Gardaí. Subsequently, so the HSA take over this. So because marine-based operations fall in between two stools, there is that sort of a dual sort of role for the HSA and the MCIB across here. It's MAIB across the UK. Marine Capacity Investigation Board established, but what they both of those may look at an incident if it's say for a fatality. The MCIB they'll put together a report. It's they're more lessons learned. HSA will look at maybe taking action against you and more a legal aspect to it, whereas this is more of a lesson. The MCIB is more of a lesson learned. This is verbal record is only as good as the paper is written on. I just put that in. I work in other transport industries, and where it comes to say rail, and they actually have a record of a verbal agreement, which is basically a written record of a verbal agreement, which isn't really a verbal agreement because it's written. but that's how much it means to safety critical infrastructure, that they actually have to go and make a written record of a verbal agreement. So it is that sort of thing, is it's a verbal record or agreement. There must be some sort of record that you must make some sort of note on it. It may not be directly referenced as in sort of change of a document, but it may be sort of recorded as a note, as even as a text or a message, that this is the way things have. Just avoid, as I say, just avoid verbal agreements, because what one person hears and what another person may think they heard may be totally different. I know from my experience, I'd always, if something was agreed verbally, I'd always follow it up with an email, and just going back in our conversation, just to refer to, and that's why I'd start off, just to refer to our conversation. We're going to do A, B, and C, just to confirm that's what the intended changes were. Yes, great, but someone has a record of it. Impolite, if you go into that, if you want to go up to the next standard, you into my electronic standards or international standard example, ISO 45001, maintain records for the required period in digital or hard copy format. So even though you may have finished a job or a task, I'd always recommend that you hold on to the documentation. Some say 3, some say 5, but you'll find if you actually have a reference to ISO, they'll actually indicate some the time scale on a lot of documentation, but it's out there. It's just that you have to know what you're dealing with. GDPR, this is the last one. I'll just go on this. Yeah, your health and safety system will hold. Yeah, and GDPR back in 2018 sort of changed an awful lot of how we hold and maintain personal details of individuals, be them employees or others. How it's held is basically it shouldn't be accessible. So it's the simple stuff. It should be on data protected files. It should be in locked cupboards. It shouldn't be. It's the simple stuff that sort of catches people out. It's the medical left on a desk. A medical, as you may have seen in various government bodies, is data, laptops or memory sticks being left on a train. It's all this simple stuff that can be dealt with, but have an idea of how you're going to deal with it before you start recording this information. You don't want to get the wrong side of GDPR. Don't want to frighten people, but it seems to be there seems to be an awful area there, especially where it comes to medical. Medical actually is a higher standard than general sort of employee information like address and whatever. Once you start collecting medical details, so your ENG 11s or whatever, that's in a different. So if you get your guys that we need to get an ENG 11, you've got their medical data. Just be very careful with that. Sophie, that's me for today. I'm sorry it was a bit sort of whistle tour, but it's just, as I say, it's just very sort of just a broad brush. I hope someone got something out of it.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. Thank you, Declan. And I think we've set all of our speakers for these events quite a challenge of getting quite broad topics into fairly short spaces. So thank you very much. We do still have time for questions. So if anyone does have a question, you can either put it in the chat or you're welcome to raise your hand, and we'll of course invite you to speak. So let us know if you have any questions. I suppose just to maybe kick it off, I do have you did touch on kind of the differences between Ireland and the UK with certain things, but I just wondered in general, this might be a bit of a silly question, I don't know, but with the standards and accreditations, are there specific ones in Ireland that companies looking to work in kind of offshore projects need to have for Irish waters, or is it national, international?
Where it comes to say vessel operators, there's a difference across here. There's a requirement a passenger boat license can operate most sort of marine-based projects, vessels working in marine-based projects. across the UK, there's a variation of the certificates, and as I was working with I was talking to a colleague of mine down in he's involved in the wind farms here in Ireland, and he was sort of saying the UK equivalent isn't accepted across here, but our documents will be accepted across the UK. So there is that sort of the Marine Safety Office, Survey Office, sorry, across in Ireland have a different take on some training requirements than we do. Like the ENG 11 and I think it's ENG 1 across the UK it's very similar but subtly different as well. So yeah, there is differences there. Where it comes to health and safety, though, there's totally different legislations there involved. So that's where it's sort of the marine aspect of it falls within the Marine Survey Office, the Her Majesty's Coast Guard across the UK, whereas here it's sort of HSE, UK HSE. There is that sort of grey area. Exactly where is that break, and that can be a problem for those sort of wanting to comply with both aspects without having to rewrite multiple documentations that will cover all the various requirements. It was like a politician's answers.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We do have a question from Mike. Mike, if you're, oh, there you are. Would you like to ask a question?
Hi, Declan. Hi, Declan. That was really, really interesting for someone who is very much besotted with the marine environment. Yeah. It's just really to get a feel for that, and in another country. One of the things I'm very interested in is the growth in behavioural safety in the energy sector in the UK. And I just wondered if there's a move in Ireland, and in particular in the marine sector, for that as well.
There is within the general marine sector as well. And as you know, here in Ireland, the whole sort of marine based power generation hasn't really sort of kicked in, and it's going to next 2 to 3 years, it's going to expand many times over. So there is going to be actually at the moment, like there is very little there where Ireland sort of lacks is, say, in the vessels operating in the marine energy fields is basically all come on with passenger boat licenses. Now I know for a fact that the department here are looking at expanding that out maybe to a workboat code, something similar to that you have in the UK, and that sort of requirements. But at the moment, a lot of marine-based legislation and control is basically it's shoehorned into something that shouldn't fit. We've got the same with rescue boat codes. They come under passenger boats. There's so many of them, so many aspects of the marine safety environment that are just sort of shoved into something that maybe is not ideal. So there is going to be expansion on that. I know myself, I'm involved in the SAR forum across the search and rescue forum here at government level there, and they are looking at that. And I think what's going to fall out of that is maybe other industries within the marine sector will have their safety requirements maybe amended or adjusted then going forward. So is that okay, Mike?
Yeah, it's just really, really interesting to see the differences. I was wondering about, in particular, behavioural safety, which is if you like, it's almost been regarded as the next generation of where health and safety will go in general, which is, you know, we've been through the heavy legislative, we've been through systems and processes and risk assessments, and now we're moving to this kind of interactive responsibility to take care of your pal. And it's more about how you behave and communicate with one another. And this is really, it's very trendy, but it's very impactful where we see it in the UK. I just wondered if that was
even things as simple as going away from text-heavy documents.
Yeah.
That's I was actually had a discussion there with a community inshore rescue boat unit, and we're looking at going away from. We're looking at other industries. So say construction has safe system work plan. It's basically a document with lots of little sort of pictograms on it, and you tick your risks, you tick your controls. It makes the individual filling it out all of a sudden then has limited input, but a lot of output from it.
Yeah.
So what you do is, instead of laboring someone to, oh yeah, you have to fill in 15 pages of meta statements. Now what you do is you sit down there and you go and tell us, here's a range of the expected hazards, the expected risks, the expected controls. You tick what you believe the hazards are and the risks and the controls you're put in place. If it's outside of these sort of format, you will have to then sort of basically record it in a different methods. But to engage with people, if you make it simple, basically a document that anyone. The other thing is anyone can read, anyone can fill out, anyone can understand. As you know yourself, you may get people with different capabilities and skills and understanding. So if you go to a very based on a very visual document, all of a sudden you get that sort of involvement of others, maybe that wouldn't if you had a text-heavy document that covers every. You've seen them. I've seen them myself. It's 15 pages, and there's about two sections that are actually relevant. Get those two sections, make them simple, make them usable. But what it does is it gives that little bit of assurance that yes, before this action was undertaken, someone went, okay, it was only 5 minutes, but it was 5 minutes where they actually sat down and they recognized they've been doing the job so many years. They've recognized, executive said, how everyone they're working with, how they could be harmed and what precautions need to be. So yeah, make it simple, get people involved. There's no point in having beautiful documents, well written, that no one's ever going to read.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Great, thanks, Mike, for your question. We've got another question from David. David, would you like to join and ask a question? We got David there.
Yeah, hello. I'm getting caught up here.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Good morning. Good morning, Dave. I'm out in I'm currently in Massachusetts now. My home office is back in Annapolis, Maryland, and there's certainly lots of wind turbine projects all along the coast here, and it's getting pretty darn active, I must say. And I was curious on about the weather conditions. I mean, you covered a lot of the other policy and statement stuff earlier, what was in that, but I don't recall hearing about the weather. I mean, where does that fit in?
Weather conditions are so dependent on actually where you are. So say I was just saying to Sophie, I was across the west coast facing onto Atlantic this morning. Now I'm back on the east coast this morning. The difference between weather, it was raining, it was miserable on the west coast, and it's beautiful and sunny here, and it's only a couple of 100 kilometers. But the weather, even the waves that you experience across on the west coast are long, low, lull waves. So you get that sort of the frequency is totally different than what you get on the east coast. And again, as I was saying, I've been working with the sort of our inshore rescue teams, and where one area may be exposed to, say, northeasterly wind, you go the opposite side of a headland, and all of a sudden that becomes sheltered. So it's very hard to sort of say weather as in sort of it involves sea state, it involves the vessel, it involves so many different aspects that weather is only one of them. So what you do is you rely on the individuals. They would have hopefully they would have some sort of knowledge and background that they know that on a certain easterly wind on the east coast of Ireland, or northeasterly wind is a totally different, even if it's gale force, it's totally different than a westerly wind here because it's off the land rather than onto the land, off the sea. So it is very difficult to, and if you get so bespoke and sort of descriptive about weather conditions, and then what you'll get is you'll get someone going, well, hold on, yeah, it's 4-6, but it's off the land. I'm 2 miles off. Sure, I won't even feel it. But now you're telling me I can't go to sea because, or I can't do this task because it's outside of the permitted limits. In reality, it's probably safer there than it is in less wind from the opposite directions. So it's very hard where it comes to weather to it's as I say, it's weather, it's wind state, it's sea state, it's current, it's tide. Some places on the where you get, and I know in Wales you get that up around the sort of Holywood Head, you get wind against tide again, and it just becomes an absolute, it's like a boiling pot. But the weather itself the wind strength mightn't be sort of very high, but what you do, you've got all these different aspects all feeding in and creating maybe a hazardous situation. So that's where I try to stay away from being very descriptive where it comes to weather, and it's so many factors are involved there. It's very hard to for an individual craft. What you do is you'd set that out, operating from an individual area. What you say is, yeah, it's operating off this port, and we know maybe getting out of this port in such and such a weather may be dangerous. It's operating such and such an area, so it'd have to be more task specific rather than a general sort of risk assessment. Did that answer, David? Or
sure, yeah. Well, I that's exactly why I asked, because there is, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and I was just wondering how you'd handle it. And I guess it's a case by case basis going forward on projects, and relying on your operators to have a good sense of safety.
Yeah, and then again comes that feeds back into your training. Like, so your training standards, who you have in place, what training they have, what experience as well. Like, are they sort of like training versus experience is a whole different subject there that I don't want to go into. But you know yourself, there's people with the right training, with the right experience, and they'll be able to come to you as an operator and say, these are our perimeters that we are happy to work in, and there's a reason, and they'll understand exactly their limits. They'll understand the vessel limits. They'll understand so many aspects of it that maybe I wouldn't. I've worked on my all life on vessels, but then again, I'd never say to a skipper or a captain, yes, you should go on this or you shouldn't go on that, because they are the guys that should know better than anyone else.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Great. Thanks, David, for your question. That's great. I think we are coming up to the hour now. So if anyone has got any more questions, maybe Declan, if you could put your contact details if you're happy in the chat, or maybe get attendees can get in touch through us if not. But I just want to say thank you very much, Declan, for your time, your brilliant presentation this afternoon. I think the discussions afterwards proved very informative and interesting topic, really. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would just quickly say that we do have the next session coming up in 2 weeks' time with Mike Cole from Query Skills, who's on the call today. So definitely keep an eye out for information on that. And you can register for the session now through the events page on our website. But yeah, since it's 3 o'clock now, I'll just say thank you very much to everyone for attending, and thanks again to Declan, and hope you'll have a good day.
Thanks, Sophie.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.